I want to like introduce you. I'm going to introduce you as Cowabunga Johnny because that is your TikTok, your YouTube. You have a website, cowabungajohnny.com. I guess your name is actually Johnny, right? That's a dumb question,
Yeah,
but just
yeah.
making sure. I'm a rapper, so I have a friend who goes by the name Fred Whitecheck, and his name is actually Scott. And I don't know why his. Some people just have a pseudonym that is completely different from their, real name. All right, so the first thing I wanted to ask you, which is kind of like where I like to start with everybody, is just to kind of get an idea of your childhood, how you grew up. I think, for pretty much everybody, I mean, at least for myself, for sure, a lot of, who I am as an adult kind of stemmed from like what I learned as a child, what I experienced as a child, because that's really like the first time you get interaction with the world, really start to kind of like learn all the nuances of society that aren't really built into you as a human when you come out of the womb. So I'd love to know like kind of just your overall background in terms of, where you grew up, how you grew up, and kind of, I guess, what your first hobbies were. I don't know if art was your first like kind of like love or that type of thing. I'll just shut up now.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. So let's see. I'm from the greater Philadelphia area, so right outside of Philly. I
Okay.
grew up in the suburbs, Delaware County, Chester County. Um, so I'm the oldest with deaf parents. So both my parents were born deaf. My first language is American Sign Language. I I grew up in Havertown, like I said, right outside of Philly, with my parents. I have two younger sisters who are also hearing. So my first sister came in '87. So I was three years old. So like at this point, I still am the only speaking person in the house. I've always lived close by to my grandparents. The family has kind of stayed close together. So I a lot of assistance and caretaking for my grandparents. That's probably more so how I learned a little more of my vocabulary as well, before going into like daycare or preschool. I mean, um, so but going to my hobbies, I like two things stand out, and that's watching cartoons and drawing cartoons.
Mhm.
Like that's like a theme throughout my entire childhood.
Right.
And so that has always been a passion of mine. I thought, it's funny, I just said it that way. I thought I was going to be a cartoonist,
Right.
but it's funny I'm saying it that way because I am now, which is awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but I thought I was going to be a cartoonist in the sense of the 2D movies that we
Right.
grew up
Right.
with, how incredible they were. I remember when Pixar came out and it was impressive and I was excited about that, but I still wasn't interested in 3D animations. I mean, I was interested, but not enough to make that my passion or career. I still stuck with 2D, illustration, cartooning. I would make my own flip books, my own little animations. Um, I was the type of kid who would buy like how to draw cartoon books. Like I still have a few of them, classic cartoons, like how to draw The Simpsons. The two cartoon franchises that I've drawn the most in my career are Simpsons and Ninja Turtles. Those
Right.
two have been like real influences on me. Um, but so so in the household growing up, it was obviously normal to me, but I didn't realize till much later that I was in a unique situation.
Hmm.
Um, and being the oldest too, a lot more responsibilities were put on me that an average kid, one of my friends, would never do.
I could go two different ways with this, and I do want to cover both at some point. But I'll start with maybe just talking about like your situation growing up. You mentioned that your parents are deaf, so I mean, like I like have this like hearing aid on the left side. I'm supposed to get another one on the other side, but partly due to like operations and money and all that other stuff, I just kind of been putting it off. So I was like born with a probably my condition I think is more rare, but basically it's called like microtia. It's like the ears didn't fully form,
Yeah.
and so I don't know exactly. I'm not an expert at all at deafness, which ironically, people like tend to think of me as like just because I do have a hearing impairment. People tend to think oh, I know ASL. I never learned ASL. Like my parents were both hearing, so kind of the inverse of you. So I didn't learn that because my parents never learned how to do sign language. They didn't really like put me into a school with other people that also had hearing impairment. So I didn't really I didn't grow up I grew up in hearing culture. That's really what it is. There's
So can
yeah,
I
yeah.
ask a question? So was that tough for you growing up?
I
Like,
think
was school, like, what was school like, class like? Were you missing out on things? Were you front row all the time?
it was a really mixed bag. I mean, so it was a little bit like what you were saying, where you didn't really kind of realize that your situation was not the norm until you got older. And it was kind of like that for me, I think, to a degree. But at the same time, in terms of school, yeah, I mean, it was tough. I mean, but like, and for various different reasons. And one thing I want to do eventually is to kind of do a podcast where I go into a lot of depth about it. But I just have that's the thing that I'm going to do soon. But it's not going to be this one, just because I feel like I do want to like really cover a lot of different things. But kind of like an overview. I for sure felt like I was not like everybody else, I think, in my school. Part of it was also like I had 30 surgeries by the time that I was 13. And so a lot of that, I have some pictures somewhere, but a lot of it was like, kind of like plastic surgery. So they basically like kind of like made an incision on the side of my head, and then they had like this kind of silicon like balloon thing that they like kind of like inserted, and then like that they used that to like stretch out the skin. But then meanwhile, in between like all the doctor visits and everything, I was also just kind of walking around with this like giant like lump on my head. So I don't, I very clearly did not look like everybody else. And then, on top of that, I was chubby, which is also just like a normal thing. But like, you also add on to it, like, this other, like, me looking different from other people. It definitely like, I don't know, it was like hard for me to feel like I fit in. It's something that like, as I've gotten older, I've gotten more comfortable with. I'm still not 100% comfortable with it. It's definitely, something I still like work to resolve, like within myself. And that's something like like that's my whole journey right now really, is to kind of be internally resolved to a point where like I feel kind of like bulletproof, I guess, is the idea. And so I mean, like, yeah, I mean, it was a little different in terms of like being able to hear in my classes. I did so they it was through the school system. They would provide me with something called an FM unit. So it was like kind of this like little radio looking thing, of look kind of like a Walkman. And like, so I had like these like headphones that I would put on. And then the teacher would have like a lapel microphone, and like they would talk, and then that would pick it up. So there were some like, there were definitely like some times when like, the teacher would forget that they even had it on. So like I would be in the cafeteria eavesdropping. They would be like in the staff room, like having conversations with, other teachers. I don't really remember there being anything like incriminating, but it was just like, for me, I was like a nosy little kid, like trying to figure out what the adults are doing. But like I went to a lot of different schools, so I mean, and so like there were years when I had an FM unit, years when I did not. There were years when I did really well in school, and then years where I did really poorly. So it was very up and down and very inconsistent. Part of also like my hearing over my life has been pretty inconsistent as well. I went through like all of these different surgeries, but like some of the surgeries I would come out and then I would hear better, but then like, oh, like the doctor would be like, oh, the ear canal is closing up again, and then they would have to like reopen it, and then like it was, so there were definitely like one day I would be able to hear like kind of better, then like within a year it would not be as good. There were times when like my right ear was the ear that I could hear best out of, and then there were times where my left ear was the ear that I could hear best out of. So it was very very like sporadic and up and down. But yeah, I mean, like for the most part, I just kind of like I had to kind of just try to adapt to like what everybody else was doing. I think in retrospect, as I've gotten older, I think I would have like to, at least go to like, a school, and know more about ASL, know more about, deaf culture, because I did not get introduced to that in any sense. That is what it is. So I was interested to know, like, because obviously you said ASL is your first community. So do you feel like other than your parents, do you kind of interact with the deaf community often at all? Or like, I'm not sure what your exposure to that outside of your parents is.
Oh yeah, growing up. So now no, but growing up, um, we pretty much spent time with only other families that had deaf parents.
Right.
So like my dad's friends, my mom's friends, we would often go to events, parties. I mean, I even though I was hearing, like I was in the part of the deaf culture, like a lot of CODAs, children of deaf adults.
Right.
So yeah, my mom was very much a part of the deaf community, supporting the community, working for the community. My dad went to the Pennsylvania School for the Deaf. They have a pretty rich deaf community in this area, in the Philadelphia area. A lot of the friends they still have from my childhood till today. It's really a unique culture. I mean, they're like, it's such a tiny population. So few understand them.
Right.
For one, I mean, like it really that's one thing that I like over and over. But there's just the population is so small. I think it's just not not everybody can really understand what they go through, what their days are like. I mean, it can be very challenging for them sometimes. Right. But a lot of technological advances that I've seen through growing up, like that, my parents were often one of the first. We were often one of the first people with new technology, whether it was a new computer. The deaf community, I think BlackBerries were popular in corporate and the deaf community. Like they were the first. I mean, because that was like the first keyboard on a phone, really, that took off. So in that sense, they were always like ahead of the game and taking advantage of what technology's out there to help either improve their daily lives or feel more like a normal daily life, I suppose. I had a lot of friends growing up. I mean, we were like friends through our deaf parents because we hung out so often. I mean, their parents would babysit me, watch us in the summer, go to the pool together. Like you spend like all your lives together with them, all the events, all the birthday parties. I mean, it's everything.
Right.
So not being a part of that, but also having that a big part of my identity is like it's strange because I don't quite fit in with the hearing world,
right?
And I certainly don't fit in with the deaf world, but I'm more comfortable with the deaf world because that was my life for 20 years or whatever.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting because like I feel like we have kind of just like a very juxtaposed, like I kind of like had like this hearing disability and then like, I feel more connected to the hearing world and then, kind of the opposite experience for you. One thing you mentioned was kind of technological advances and you I'm sure know this and a lot of people may, but I feel like the deaf community, and it's not everybody. I mean, maybe you probably know a lot more about this than I do. But there are definitely people who are in the deaf community that frown upon getting hearing aids, that frown upon, I guess anything to really like, try to help you hear better if you could, because they want to embrace kind of the authentic, deaf experience, I think. Can you correct me if I'm wrong or maybe elaborate on?
There is a small population like that. My mom got cochlear implants maybe about 5 years ago.
Right.
I think she's lost some friends because of that,
Right.
but then, so
That to me sounds so deep, right? Like, I mean, to lose friends over something like, having a hearing aid or whatever. I mean, like that.
so like, I don't know if I'll ever understand it because I don't think I've ever like really had a deep conversation with a deaf person that who is so much against it.
Right.
But I like there's definitely that part that's like, hey, we were meant to be this way, you know,
Right.
and that subculture is everywhere. But so when my mom was thinking about getting the cochlear implants, it coincided with my wife being pregnant and that being her first grandchild. So like what kind of motivated her or whatever was like the possibility to hear her grandchild and
Right.
everybody else too.
Right.
So that like really excited her, and she just, it was like, that is much more important to me than, if somebody turns their back on me.
Right.
And by the way, like, why would you want to be friends with somebody that's going to do that to you?
Yeah.
So, like you said,
I mean, like I can 100% agree and understand if somebody were to say that like they don't want to have a hearing aid. I get that. What I don't necessarily get is to be so outraged at somebody who does get a hearing aid that you decide that you're not going to like communicate
yeah,
with them.
like shun them.
Yeah, yeah. I just feel
Because,
like that's a bit much.
well, it's
But
really, yeah, it's awful because then they don't fit anywhere. I mean, then they feel like they don't belong
right,
in any world.
right,
So,
right.
yeah, no, I get it.
Do you ever feel like, as a hearing person, like, do you feel like you didn't feel very like kind of accepted within the deaf community? And I don't just mean like within your parents, but I mean like, with some of the people maybe that you've interacted with.
I wouldn't say like not accepted, but I've definitely been. There's been times where like I've been maybe teased or put down about my sign
Right,
language,
right,
like specifically my level of sign language, um, which which is funny because back then I was great. Now I can't recall everything, but I can still sign, obviously. But it's not like
right,
I'm as fluid as I was. Um, that's like the only thing I can think of. So like it's a pretty accepting community, especially children of deaf adults. I mean, we've made friends with deaf kids too. We were friends with deaf families where deafness runs in the genes in the
right.
family. So like there are complete families that are deaf. I mean, we've had lots of fun. We've been to so many houses. It was a great time growing up. So I wouldn't say, I always felt accepted in that
Right.
community. I would say I felt less accepted in like school, so I was going to say, talking about education, when I started school, they treated me like something was wrong with me
Mm-hmm.
just
Well, when you
because.
say when you say they, are you talking about teachers or classmates or?
Well, so that's a good question. Was it the school, or was it more like my parents and grandparents influencing the school? That I'm not completely sure about. But like they made sure that I was in specialized phonics classes,
Uh-huh.
speech classes, like speech therapy classes and stuff.
I mean, I think that's kind of normal given your situation. I mean, like, the formative years of when you learn how to speak are, like by the time I think, you're like 6 or 7 when you're at your peak, learning ability in terms of being able to speak. And obviously you have a different environment that doesn't necessarily, use speech. I have a kind of a speech impediment because I just don't hear certain frequencies. Like if you look at like my actual hearing test, this is another thing that I think people who, are not who are not, do not have some kind of hearing disability just don't understand is that hearing is not just like, oh, you hear it 100% or 10%. It's literally like a spectrum of like, you have your bass sounds at the bottom, and then you have like your really high pitched, high frequency sounds at the top. So like my hearing, will dip off like pretty much entirely when you get to a certain high frequency. It's the sound like the S sound, the SH, the CH and J, and those things I've always had trouble with. And I went to speech therapy for a long time. I would be kind of more surprised if you didn't like kind of struggle with speech, growing up, because just because of how important it is to learn those things at a young age, and then your environment just not having a lot of talking in a verbal language, right? I guess, I mean, like the reality is that like you have been pretty successful in life, I think, other than the fact that you currently are doing what you love to do, which is fire. But like also you were in IT, right, for 16 years. Can you tell
Yeah.
me a little bit about that? Like what exactly were you kind of doing on your day to day? Are you a programmer or
Yeah. So I went to school for computer science.
right?
Cool.
I did as well.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Cool. What school?
So I went to the University of South Alabama. That my wife got a job in Alabama after she graduated from grad school, and so I actually went back when I was 28, and then I got my bachelor's degree, I think when I was like 31 or something. And now I currently like I do development for a couple of web applications and one mobile application. But
Yeah, that was what I did, web application development. So I worked for a company called Vanguard. You might have heard of it.
yeah, they managed my finance, not particularly well, but
Well, yeah, let's not go there.
yeah,
A lot of my work was around developing web applications and tools around the financial advisor space.
right,
So we served internal financial advisors, but also advisors external to Vanguard that would use our website and tools and sell our funds, essentially. So I started as a developer right out of college, and I've always been one to like excel at jobs.
right,
So like, and I think it's a lot of it does have to do, I think, with the way I grew up, because I had a lot of responsibilities. So I always had to be prepared, had to be responsible, so like that helped prepare me, even though I was a slacker.
right,
So I was always excelled in my job. But the one thing was, and I was going to go back to this about the speech therapy thing. It wasn't as much that I needed help speaking correctly or pronunciating correctly, at least not that I remember.
right,
It was more so, he doesn't talk. Why doesn't he talk?
right,
How do we get him to talk more?
right,
That was a constant theme. And even in my performance reviews, which I still have a lot of them actually, like constant theme, speak up more, talk more, talk more.
right,
And like, I'm the type of person that I won't talk in a setting like that unless it adds value to it, or it's well thought out, or it's so being great at my job, but having that slowed my growth in the beginning, on top of like the 2009 financial crisis, other external stuff. At some point in my career, there was a shift. And at this point, I had got out of the financial advisor space and went into CRM development. And I had to migrate. That was when I was a senior tech lead. And at this point, I was leading an effort to migrate 3 divisional CRMs to a singular one, dynamic CRM. That project, which was so different than any web application development project, got me insight to other areas. Not that I enjoyed it, but like it gave me an insight on like, other areas of IT and development. And that was like the Microsoft world, which I had never been a part of other than, the software that we use every day. At that point, I don't know if there was like a shift at Vanguard or whatever, but or suddenly they started realizing that, yeah, this guy's pretty good. But it was like I was on a track, and I was just getting promoted. I was just continuing to excel, getting promoted, and eventually I was senior architect. So, but one thing I knew, going back to going to college for computer science, I made that switch to computer science. I knew I was good in IT. I was interested. I made websites in grade school. I built my own Visual Basic programs, but I still wanted to be an animator or cartoonist. And so like that was a tough struggle of like, do I go the safe route, stick with IT and, make sure I have a good career, or do I go the art route and take a chance? And I was influenced to go the computer science route, which still paid off. But like when I started my job at Vanguard, I knew immediately that I wanted to leave.
Right.
I wanted to like retire out of the corporate world. So I immediately started planning and learning. I mean, I was in the finance world already. So all the literature and resources of investments and everything were surrounding me. So I was teaching myself. It was helping my job, but it was also helping my finances.
Right.
So that, and I really stuck to my plan. And by sticking to it over the 15 years, it allowed me to be like, hey, you know what? Not a lot of people have this opportunity, but I can walk away from my job, try this for a few years, or do this forever. I've been fortunate enough that as I moved up, I didn't like really keep up with the Jones, or like, we still have had great experiences. We have an amazing house. Like, I'm really happy with everything we have. But I've also been able to put away a lot. Same with my wife.
Right.
Just with careful planning. So originally my plan was I was going to leave by 50. One of the reasons it was, well, I had calculated it that way, but one of the reasons 50 was, I think at Vanguard, when you turn 40, then you start earning money in a medical account that you can carry into retirement.
Right.
And then 50 is the earliest you could retire from Vanguard, while still keeping those benefits.
Right. Although for you, that would have been like, what, another 10 years or so? I mean, maybe you're what, 40 now?
40, yeah. So that would have been another 10 years. In those last 2 or 3 years that I was there, they took away that benefit. So like when I left, there's no like real retirement benefit like when you leave Vanguard.
Right.
Which is interesting, I think. I think it's, I mean, a lot of companies are going away from loyalty, which is funny.
Yeah, I mean, that seems to be like the never-ending trend. I don't know how it landed on that. Maybe that is the most efficient way to run a company where I don't know. Like, I just feel like that's the thing everybody tells me, is that if I want to get like a raise that isn't like, 2%, I need to job hop. Like that's, especially in this industry, right? Like, and I think that would be a good thing for companies, but they seem to not want to incentivize their employees to, stay in there. So I don't know. And it's not just Vanguard, obviously. It's so many companies.
Oh yeah, it's a whole problem everywhere. So they took that benefit away, which was like, like, not that was like a real hook onto the plan, but it made me rethink it. And at the same time, COVID's happening. We're working remotely. I'm really remote working opened my eyes up to a lot of inefficiencies, a lot of wasted time, in my opinion. And like that also really bothered me. Like, we only have a certain amount of time on this earth.
Right.
I don't want to waste it arguing about a presentation, a PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah, no, I get that. And if I were in a financial situation where I felt like I could afford to really take a risk, I would probably do that. But I'm probably still like, I'm a little behind the curve of where you were probably. So it's just like me getting to that point, hopefully eventually.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I would definitely stick to it, because it's, once you get out, man, it's so freeing. And like your day to day, you can really, here's what was really eye opening was like the amount of skills I have. and not only the amount of skills I have, but how many I use and apply every day. And I realized that at Vanguard, I was only like applying or using this much of my skills,
Right.
where I have a huge range. I work in the house. This is my studio. I have an office upstairs. I'm like running around all over the house. I love doing a variety of things. I just get too bored doing the same thing all the time. And then I'm good at prioritizing work and hitting deadlines, but I also like to also have to be able to choose exactly what I want to work on. Those last few years at Vanguard, I was just hating my job more and more, because of the like the whole corporate world, because of some toxic situations there.
What was it that led you to say that, like, enough is enough? This is what I'm gonna start pursuing, like what I want to do, versus like this kind of, safe but kind of boring, like, alternative.
So it wasn't like one thing. It was a whole mess of things happening all at the same time that I think like brought it all upon me.
Right.
I was having, my child was only a couple years old.
Hmm.
That was brand new to me. I was kind of struggling with that. Um, I was having like, it was the first time I felt in my life like, whoa, I can't, I don't know what to do here. And it's not like I can just, there's no equation or it's not something I could study real easily, and not
Right.
everything works on every child, blah, blah, blah. So there was that. Some family members, well, my grandmother passed away, and she raised a lot. She raised me for a lot of my life. Same with my sisters.
Right.
And then some family members got sick, diagnosed with cancer. Like, it was just like all of this happening. And then at work, there was a lot of stressful things going on at work.
And how far, like, was this also around the pandemic time or after, before?
This was, I want to say 2021, like
Okay.
fall, like, yeah, second half of 2021. So I had been facing these physical health problems,
Hmm.
and not being able to like figure out what's going on. Like, I would have all kinds of stomach issues,
Right.
and really, like, I spent, I had to go to vision therapy because something happened with my eyes, which I didn't even know vision therapy was a thing. Uh, so that was,
What exactly is vision therapy, if you don't mind me asking?
yeah. So essentially, what they diagnosed me with, I can't remember exactly what it's called, but they're deficiencies essentially, is the speed at which your lens reacts to like far and near,
Right.
the speed of focus essentially.
Right.
For whatever reason, whatever these, it was, looking back, it was all mental health that was causing these physical problems. At least
Right.
that's what makes sense to me. What I started to notice was, yeah, like I'd look at something far away, I'd look close up, and I could notice how, even though it's not that long, it was still noticeable that it was like, whoa, why is it taking this long to focus?
Right.
So a lot of vision therapy is practicing and strengthening whatever those muscles are around the lens and the eye to help
Right.
speed that up. And so they had a whole range of tools, and they also had like software. They had a thing with an Xbox controller. So there was like all kinds of stuff to help improve. And then like they had an at-home kit. That was interesting. That took a few months, but it really did help. It was noticeable.
Right.
So I was having all of these health issues. It got so bad that like I realized I couldn't even take care of my family. I was so sick and just I just couldn't take care of my family. And I
Right.
realized that, like, that was really weighing on me. And if I can't take care of myself, how can I take care of my family? That was probably the one thing that like pushed me to get help.
Right.
So then I started looking for therapists, psychiatrists, and took that was like that was like one of the hardest things to do. And I think part of the reason was over the pandemic or over those years, there was like a massive increase in mental health help, I think.
Right.
So that might have been part of it. But I kept trying, finally I got a behavioral therapist, and it was a huge lifesaver. But part of that process was me taking a leave of absence from work
Right.
to work through all of these problems that I'd carried with me for so long,
Right.
and then I was ignoring and then just putting aside, or being a man.
Yeah. Yeah.
By doing that, I mean, it has changed my life tremendously.
No,
Uh,
see, this is the thing, right? Like, I was actually watching a video the other day, and I don't remember who it was that like put up the video, but it was on YouTube, and it's this kind of like 60-year-old or so, like Midwest guy. He looks like a farmer, big beard. You know, he looks like you would imagine, right? And he has this video basically talking about like mental health because it's Men's Mental Health Month or something, and he was basically, saying that his perspective on mental health is more or less that men should, suck it up, and kind of his kind of theory, I think, or at least this is what, it said in the video, was that like, he equated it to kind of like if you get sick and you have a cold or something, it's better to not take antibiotics or any type of pills. You just let your immune system deal with it. Now, I don't agree with that perspective, but that's what this person said. I don't get it because like, all right, let me just pretend, right? Let me say I believe him on 100%. I believe that this is the best way to deal with your mental health, to not talk about it, to just grit your teeth and bear it, and like don't like seek out help. But this was his tangent about men's mental health. It was not the thing that he was proposing for women's mental health, which means that women, in his view, would have to have a completely different, like, neurological makeup, and that their mental health is completely different than men's, right? Which, like none of that makes sense to me. But, I also just feel like there is a big stigma about, and part of it is, men, but like it's like there's a stigma about mental health in general, where it's just like people think that you have to be broken to go to therapy, right? Like, I think that is a very stupid assumption, right? Like, I think, at the end of the day, therapy and working on your mental health in general is, in my opinion, just a way to achieve your ideal, or the more internally resolved you are as a person, the more productive you're likely to be. The more, I won't say happy, but just, to be able to acknowledge that like there are, some negative things that like might be affecting you, or there are negative things that are happening in the world around you at any given time. You can acknowledge that, but also not be like, in a crippling, fetal position, like, like worried about like, you don't have to be a ball of depression to just acknowledge that, okay, these things suck, but I'm going to do whatever I need to do to be like kind of the best me that I can be, right? And I feel like, I don't know. It's just like I wish people like because I feel like like too many people look at therapy. If I say like I'm going to therapy, well they're like, well, what's wrong, right? Like, and it doesn't have to be something wrong. I mean, it really is just a way of resolving whatever you are not resolving internally, because I don't think that like doing nothing, I don't think that like just bottling everything up is ever going to lead you to being fully enlightened or whatever the case, right? Like, I just feel like the peak performance that you can get as a human is to be fully comfortable and know how to navigate your emotions, know how to navigate your brain, because your brain is kind of controlling everything you do. Your brain is controlling everything you touch, everything you see, everything you hear. everything is literally like your brain is so powerful that like you can be sick, you can take a placebo, and if you believe that it's going to make you feel better, you will, right? Like that's how placebos work. And likewise, if you think that you're going to be sick, your brain can literally physically make you sick, right? Like so if you don't understand how your brain works, if you don't understand the literal tool that you're using to navigate the world, how do you think that you're going to be navigating the world properly, right? Like it's like I have a car, but I never read the manual on how to fucking drive it. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And I just
Yeah.
think like the bottling it up is like, it's just like that's like saying like, oh, you shouldn't read your car manual unless your car is broken. That doesn't make any sense, right? Like you're literally just kind of handicapping yourself, I think, if you just don't pursue that type of, pursue, an understanding of yourself. But that is kind of a rant.
Well, I was going to just add, like, how are you going to be the best you if you don't know everything it is to know about yourself?
Right.
Like, knowing everything you can about yourself is going, in my opinion, is going to help you succeed and just be a better person, be a better version of yourself.
Right. One thing I was wondering, because you mentioned that when you were like growing up that you didn't talk very much. Like how did you grow out of that? Or did you grow out of that? How did you kind of like in general, what was your like, later years like kind of like high school, college, do you feel like you started like I don't know, do you feel like you fit more into the hearing world after as you got older?
College was the first time where I was like, oh, now I feel like
Right.
I belong. That was the first time where I really felt like I could be myself. But up until that point, I mean, even still today, I mean, that's just my personality. I'm an introvert. I don't, like I was saying earlier, I don't speak up unless I, really want to think it adds value.
Right.
I love comedy, so I do like to joke a lot.
Right.
Depending on the setting, But growing up, so I think there's a lot of reasons why. But like one thing that sticks with me is so I'd have to go to a lot of places with my parents to be their interpreter, translator, help them out. So some things that stick out are like when people try to get their attention, hearing people at the store,
Right.
and they don't realize that they're deaf, and they think they're ignoring them,
Right.
and they curse them off. And I'm like a kid right there, and like you just like, what am I supposed to do?
Right.
And I'm little, like I'm not talking like 10, I'm talking like 6.
Right.
So I saw a lot of hatred, or I saw a lot of like unkind people towards my parents growing up.
Right.
So that I think fed into a reluctance to speak my mind. Also, I did grow up in a culture where it was like, be a man, step it up. It was very different rules between me and my sisters. So yeah.
You mentioned something that like I kind of experienced in two different ways. One was that you had mentioned that like people get angry obviously at your parents for not being able to hear them. I remember I'm just going to tell the story because I'll never tell it again because, it's a very rare opportunity I get to tell it. But like I used to work at Kmart and in general, I worked in retail for a couple of years, it's a bad place for a deaf person, honestly, but it is what it is. Like you got to work, right? Like, but I had a friend of mine who I had known for a long time, and I got him a job as well at Kmart. And I had been working at Kmart for a couple months or so, and I was just kind of like going about my business, doing, my job. And I try to interact with people when I get an opportunity to. But I also am, I was very like shy and introverted as well. And especially, in those years. And I remember I got my friend hired, and he basically like I talked to him one day, and he was like, "Yeah, everybody here thinks you're an asshole," and that was just like, and he told me that because he's my friend, right? Like we
Yeah.
like we're pretty close, and but like that's just the reality, right? Like people don't get it, people don't understand that deaf people exist. Like I go out into public, and like it's like if I just walk around the neighborhood or something, it's like I really don't even want to have conversations with people because I don't want to have the burden of trying to understand what they're saying. I do have a hearing aid, but it doesn't really like number one, I should have another one, but I just haven't gotten it. But also, it only does so much, right? It doesn't, make me hearing, but it helps, I guess. But overall, I've been, very averse to trying to like, just talk to random people like, that I don't know. And we were talking about technology. Like, it's pretty cool that, like, right now, like, I'm listening to you through my hearing aid. Some people might not know this, but like, I actually have like Bluetooth pretty much on this, so I can like play music and I can listen to like whatever, song or YouTube videos or whatever. So that's like one of the cooler things about the technology. But I think the other thing that you mentioned that I was thinking about was, you had the burden of basically being the hearing person that can interpret for your parents when they're trying to navigate the world, right? I put that burden a little bit on my wife, right? Like again, I'm not fully deaf, but like it's like when I go to places, I would much rather like her like order a sandwich or something from a restaurant because like if I don't hear something, I don't want to like a lot of the time I have to agree to shit that I don't know what I'm agreeing to, right? Like somebody will be like, "Hey, do you want to?" And I'm like, "Yeah," and like that, like I don't know what I just agreed to. All I know is that they asked me a question. I didn't want to look stupid, so I'm just like, "Yeah, all right." And
You
that
don't show up, so that's why they're calling you an asshole.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That I mean, like, so I just like I let my wife kind of do some of that. Like, did that feel? I don't know. Like, I mean, that's gotta like be a bit much, right? It's a little intense, I would think, for like a kid. Like you kind of have the responsibility of trying to interact with adults. When you are still very little, and you're also like it's if you kind of like mess up at all. There's a little bit of I'm sure your parents are going to be like a little bit angry about that, right? Like, so it's just like what does that feel like? I mean, to be on that end of it, because I feel like I put my wife on the other end of it.
What I'll say one thing it has helped me with is just communication in general between cultures, between languages, between technology and people that don't speak technology. Like a lot of the skills of that I picked up translating for them has really helped me. But let's see. So, I mean, as a kid, it didn't feel like a burden because that was my life.
Right.
I didn't know anything else. I can certainly remember times where it's like, oh, I don't want to sign. Come on, and like my sisters, I might try to be like, Marie, you sign, or Danny, you sign, or we might fight about over who signs, and that like just that idea alone makes me cringe a little because like, can you imagine your parents, your kids are fighting about who wants to translate?
I get it though. Like I
No, yeah,
definitely.
I mean, it's just these are like the weird dynamics that we face, in that kind of situation, and like so. On top of that, I can remember a lot of times where they put me in like really stressful situations, at least stressful to me. Like I've had to interpret weddings. I'm not a trained sign language interpreter. I'm I'm someone that knows sign language.
Right.
You know, um, just because you can speak English and Spanish doesn't mean you're a good translator.
Right.
So that was another thing that bothered me was everybody who was so it was like the deaf world. Sometimes they tease me because I didn't know sign language well enough.
Right.
The hearing world had no idea like my level of sign language. They thought I was brilliant. They thought I was amazing.
Right.
It's so funny how many like compliments I would get afterwards. Like, how do you know? How do you know how well I signed?
Yeah, I'm assuming you've seen that video where there's a person that clearly does not know sign language at all, but they
Yeah.
decided to just go up there and try it anyway because somebody was like, "Hey, we'll pay you some money if you sign this," and it's just like, nobody like hearing people don't know. I don't know. I don't know ASL at all. I know like A, B, C, D, E, F, but like,
Yeah.
I know some like, some words, but like other than that, like not much.
So I'll say the one thing that later as an adult that I realize more and more that is probably, well, I don't know. I don't know how surprising this would be to you. I was the translator between my parents and their parents.
Okay. Wait, so
Like
your grandparents were hearing or
yeah,
okay.
my only my parents and my family are deaf, so they knew, like you, they knew the alphabet, maybe a few words here or there,
Right.
but neither of their parents learned sign language. So
Right.
they went their whole lives not being able to have a full, clear conversation with their parents.
Right.
Like we are right now.
Yeah, that's
So that so that in itself is like, I don't know. To me, that's a problem. So
what
like,
is what is
go ahead.
their relationship with their parents like then? I mean, like, is it good? Is it healthy? I'm like, I mean, like, here's the thing, right? Like, there's so many people that like, I don't, there's plenty of people that have like unhealthy relationships with their family regardless. So I like, but that's just an extra factor in it. But I am curious to know, like, how, like, I don't know, like, how do you like, how do you go through life and not really have a full conversation with your parents, right? Like that's a difficult
No,
thing.
it's yeah. I mean, um, yeah. I mean, they're the they were also our caretakers too. So it was like it. Their relationship was like it was very different than most. So they depended on them a lot, even though I know they didn't need to, because I knew what my parents were capable of. I knew they could, like, honestly, they didn't need to take me around. I wasn't alive before, so and they were getting through life,
Right.
um, but it's a convenience for them. It makes their lives easier, just like kind of like you said earlier about your wife ordering. It just
Yeah.
is easier that way. And I think there's certainly things in this life where that makes sense, but I think we also have to be careful about what we make easier on ourselves that could be at the detriment of others.
Right.
And that's a tough balance, I think, to figure out.
You mentioned you have one kid or more.
Yeah. So I have
Uh,
a 5-year-old daughter. Yeah.
okay. So do you think that are you working to teach her ASL? Like I don't know like what the dynamic there is between, your parents and, your child. I mean, I know you said that like as you've gotten older, I think you're, not as fluent as you used to be in ASL.
Right. Yeah. When Ava was born, we did teach a lot of sign language, a lot of the baby sign language, which is really helpful.
Right.
Do you have kids or do
No,
you
no.
have a child? If you ever have a child, use at least use the it's like 5 or 6 baby sign language. It's really helpful because they can communicate with you much sooner than they can verbally.
Right.
So so it started off that way. My mom started coming around more and also helping teach. But then like things, yeah, faded away. COVID happened. Actually COVID was happening around the same time. So the short story is no, I haven't taught her much sign language since she was a baby. So she doesn't really know. She knows a few things like thank you and please
Right.
and all done and all the key ones.
Right.
But no, she's not fluent. No.
I haven't even gotten into the like weeds of asking you about like when you started, like when did you start kind of discovering that you were, good at art? When did you kind of when did you decide that you wanted to kind of make that into a career? I know you mentioned that like prior to college, maybe you were thinking about it, but then you decided to go the computer science route, which, I mean, that might have been the right move. I don't know. Like you definitely wouldn't have had the same financial resources, right? Right. Coming out of college.
Well,
But
we
so
don't
when
know. But yeah, probably.
Yeah, yeah. So like when did you really like fall in love with art for the first time? When did you kind of like I mean, I know you mentioned cartoons, maybe that is it, but in terms of your actual ability, because I appreciate art. I can't draw for anything, right? I remember like when I was in school, like in elementary school, there would be like there's always just like one kid that was like drawing like pictures of like Goku or like, some Dragon Ball Z stuff. And like I wanted to like draw the same stuff and I used to try, but I was so bad at it. And like I practiced a lot, but I was never it was never something I was able to do very well.
It's funny. I watched a little of your last podcast
Right.
earlier today, and your guest was talking about people not necessarily wanting to be alone with their thoughts.
Hmm.
And like, I think he mentioned something like, if we were artists, we would just draw,
Right,
and
right,
spend time. And he's right.
right,
Although I'm a person that likes to be in my thoughts. Like I love just constantly thinking.
right.
Uh, that's a little different about me. So, but when did I first fall in love with art? I'll tell you when I decided to make it a career. Um, so when I was going through the health issues, speaking through the therapist, like I said, I had already known I was like eventually going to get out of this job.
Right.
But I still didn't know that I was going to leave, within the next year or whatever. So working through the therapist, a lot like enabled or allowed me to try more art, get back into that. I had like really abandoned it. Like, and if you compared me to, before college, that, I mean, I always had paper and pencil with me. I was always drawing cartoons.
Right.
I don't know when like I knew I was good at it, and like it's even like a lot of artists today. Like it's hard to say. It's hard for us to even say we're good at it because we're always improving. We always want to get better. I always knew I loved cartoons. As One of the things my wife took me to painting with a twist. Have you ever been to one of those?
No.
It's where you can drink while you paint a
Right. Is
portrait.
that like a couples painting type of
Yeah.
thing? Yeah. I've heard of it. I've never done one. And it's something I would like to do, but then like I don't know. Tell me something. What is the like skill level in that type of class, right? Like I know it's varied,
Zero.
right? None.
Zero. Yeah, yeah. I mean, you could know absolutely.
I don't want to be surrounded by like Van Goghs and Dalis and stuff and while I'm just
There's
sitting here
always
with my
one or
little stick
two.
figures.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's always one or
and like
two.
a half a bottle of vodka and just
Well, one good thing is you can go to the site and look up the images and
right,
like pick which ones might look easier to you.
right.
But my wife, oh no, I told her, I'm like, I've kind of been in the mood for painting. And then she set up the date for us. We went, I think it was a beach scene, or no, maybe it was Baby Yoda, Grogu.
Right, right.
And when we were driving home, I had the realization that the entire time I was painting, I was 100% focused on the painting. And I was really happy with the output. I'd never painted before, like, other than like, finger painting and stuff when you're a kid.
Right.
I always drew, illustrated, but I never went to art class, never had any kind of art education.
Right.
So that was the first time I had like really experienced painting. And it's a fun experience when you find something new that you find love in. Like it gives you happiness and hope, right?
Right.
So like that was just uplifting in itself. And then that like motivated me to do more and more art. And then I was just like, people were complimenting my art. People were saying really nice things. I started sharing it. And what's funny is what really gave me the push or the confidence to be like, okay, I can do this, was ChatGPT. I was still like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do all of this? Because if I'm going to be an artist the way I think I want to be an artist, like you got to make a ton of content. You got to do a lot of marketing. You got to do a lot of, there's a lot of jobs. once ChatGPT came out, or at least that version 3 or 3.5, it was like, to me, it was like, yes, okay. Now I have a way, because I got my IT brain. It immediately thinks of all kinds of ideas on how I can use it to my advantage, and how I could possibly connect systems.
Can you give me like an example of how you could use that?
So right away, I used it to help me create listings on Etsy for
Okay.
my. Initially, so you may have seen that I like trading cards. I do
Yeah, yeah.
trading card and sketch art. So one of the ways I make money is making custom trading cards,
Right.
custom baseball cards for employees, for kids, for adults, whatever. So that's my trading card memories site. I don't know if you've ever created a listing on Etsy, but like if you need to create like 25 listings even in a day, it can be time consuming, very time consuming.
Right.
But if I can batch them up, if I can have ChatGPT build me most of the content, and I had already gotten, like I said, I was really good at translating, right, and communicating and stuff. And like
Right.
one of the things, being a slacker growing up, I'm doing essays and stuff, and basically uh, plagiarizing, but twisting it to make it sound like my words,
Right.
or editing it to make it sound my words.
Right.
So I'm like already well trained in that.
Right. Right.
So, so that was like one of the first ways I use it pretty much every day. I use it to brainstorm a lot. That's probably number two. Or no, number one actually is brainstorm. I often get ideas, and then, and I love doing this with people too. I just love having brainstorming sessions. Problem solving is one of the most fun things for me. But I'll have an idea, whether it's art related or IT related or both or whatever, and I want to see how far I can go with it,
Right.
and how I can massage it, how I can add to it, how I can elevate it essentially,
Right.
and so that's what I'll do. I'll bring an idea to ChatGPT, and I'll just keep feeding it questions back and forth until I've kind of honed an idea, and then execute it. So that's a main purpose
Right.
for me.
So, in addition to all of the other things that you do, right, you also have a podcast, which is called FreeMind Network Podcast, which has a website, freemindnetworkpodcast.com. But I will also include links to everything in the description. So, can you tell me about that? When did you get started with that? What your goal is with that, and what your role is with that as well?
Yeah, so I'm a co-founder of the FreeMind Network podcast and the FreeMind Network itself. We have 5 shows under our belt right now, all on the same channel. So I serve as essentially the CTO of the FreeMind Network podcast. My co-founder and partner Nate, he's the host of
Right.
the flagship show, and then a couple others. It focuses a lot on like what we're doing here now, really, but with a main focus on like entrepreneurship, founders, small business owners, like the little guys, like the people we know, the people in our neighborhoods and stuff, and trying to build and foster more community. So like that, like for instance, so there's a FreeMind Network podcast. That's the flagship one. He'll interview people remotely anywhere. But FreeMind Local is the one I think he really enjoys the most. And that's where he gets to go like door to door, like go to a brewery and hang out there and talk to the brewer, interview him for the day, and then walk across the street and talk to the restaurant owner, and then like building these connections. It's been really neat for me too, because at the same time, I'm entering the artist community in this area in Westchester. So like that, both of them growing together has worked for both of us really well.
Right.
And so the podcast, I think Nate's up to like 100 episodes. It's on YouTube.
Yeah, there are a lot. I did see that.
Yeah, yeah, and we have a late night style TV show. We're only 2 episodes in. It's hosted by Dave Benson. He's originally from UK, but he lives in New Zealand now.
Right.
Uh, and it's just pretty funny. There's a couple episodes out there, and there's more coming. He's I think he has one coming out soon.
I got one more question, right? Let's just the fun one, I guess.
Okay.
Was there anything either you or you and your, brothers and sisters, was there anything where you kind of like were able to get away with knowing that your parents were deaf? Like I have a sister, and she'll, occasionally just, purposely talk at a low volume so I won't hear her, and she'll just be talking smack about me like right next to me and shit. But I know that like, it's got to be a different environment, so I'm just curious to know some like maybe an anecdote or so.
Yeah, I mean, so it's funny. That is a question that I've got a lot over the
Really?
years. Yeah, it's like well, it comes in different forms. Like some people are like, "Oh, so you got to curse all the
Yeah,
time?"
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But it's one of those things where it's like when you can do it, it's not that fun. Like it's
Yeah.
not exciting, So it's so like yeah, I could curse, but like I wasn't really someone that cursed a lot. But like here's one thing that like I could have gotten away with, but I never did was call out of school, like
Right.
skip school. All I had to do was call from their what was called TTY, which is essentially a keyboard phone.
Right.
All I would have had to do is call the relay center as one of my parents and just say, "Yeah, Johnny's sick today. He won't be coming to school,"
Right.
and they would
Right.
never know unless it came up in a meeting or something. But I don't know. I just never did that. Yeah, but it's funny that, like I said, a form of that question comes up a lot. But there's
Yeah.
like if I think of some funny moments, some funny anecdotes, like growing up, answering the phone as a child. Can I talk to one of your parents? My parents are deaf. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I'll call back later.
Later when they're not deaf.
Yeah, yeah. I was telling a story to someone, and I just mentioned my mom was driving me somewhere, and they stopped me in the story and said, "Wait, your mom can drive?" I
Yeah.
said,
There are
"Yeah,
people that ask me that too. I think it's just like yeah. I mean, like I can still hear like I hear sirens when I drive, but also I just feel like there are a lot of people that just like have their music up all the way anyway. They're not going to hear anything, right? They're just
Well, I was more shocked by the response to that. It was, well, blind people can't drive. That's what they can't see.
yeah, yeah,
So, and that just goes back to like what we were talking about at the beginning, which is like the lack of knowledge about the community, about deaf culture, about the hearing impaired
right.
world, and so
I know you're running low on time, so I'll let you go. But thank you very much for this conversation. I definitely enjoyed it. As you're somebody that I don't get to speak to often because I don't get to know very many people that are even adjacent to the deaf community. And if there's anybody who is like part of the deaf community or somebody adjacent, I would definitely be interested in having those people come on and talk about it a little bit more in depth. But yeah, thank you very much for your time.
yeah, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to following your podcast and
All right,
seeing.
see you. Thank you very much.